My name is Daniel Reznik, and this is the Getting Out of the Way podcast, where we will be integrating the psychedelic experience.
And here we go. Dr. Charlie Powell, man, it is a pleasure to meet you. I have a little bit of background on you, but I don't know who else does. So if you can give me like a 2-minute setup, that would be fantastic. Who are we talking to?
2-minute setup. Dr. Charlie Powell. Let's see. I was in the U.S. military for 16 years. Between the Army and the Navy, I served for 16. Army for 4, Navy for 12. I got out in 2005. I started off my first bit of the military with the first Gulf War conflict and ended up with the Afghan conflict. So started off as a combat medic, ended up as a physician, got out in 2005. Went into the civilian side of practice. At the time, I was triple boarded physician, and I carried a lot of baggage with me when I left the military. About 2 years after I got out, I started experiencing some isolation and some other problems and symptoms associated with PTSD, including night terrors that were associated with sleep paralysis, which was an interesting mix. After decades of dealing with VA medications and treatments and various other things, I finally had built my company up to a very large company that I sold to United Healthcare about almost 3 years ago now. And at the time, I realized that one of my medications from the VA was causing central nervous system tremors that just were keeping me from operating. And I could run the company, but could not literally operate as a surgeon or a physician anymore. So anyway, I at that time started exploring other avenues in life. A lot of people think that my artwork on my body came from my military days, but it actually came from after turning age 50. I just wanted to do something different. I've always challenged myself not to be common. And in doing so, of all people, my tattoo artist turned me on to two words that I never knew belonged together, and that was psychedelics.
Oh, wow.
And let me tell you something, man. It was he talked to me about it a good bit, and I started exploring it. And so in August of 23, I went into treatment with Ibogaine, and it was the best decision I ever made in my life. I worked for 4 months prepping for that session, and I had an amazing experience. And I'm here today to not talk about it so much. I mean, I'm glad to, but talk about where the problems are in Western medicine and where we've fallen short for quite some time. Anyway, I can take this direction, any direction you
Yeah,
want.
same. I appreciate that. That was a lot, right? There's a lot to unpack just there in those 2 minutes. And I'm sure that could be a podcast all its own. I do want to touch on a couple of things that you just hit on, right? So highly functional PTSD, a lot of people don't kind of get that, right? They assume that PTSD, depression, anxiety at its kind of upper thresholds incapacitates individuals, but it's really not the case. And I think it's great to kind of lend a voice to that.
For me, coming back from that treatment, I mean, you got to realize I walked out of that place. I was nearly real-time integrating during my experience. I was so ready for it. I mean, everything made sense. It was crystal clear to me what was going on. The messages that I needed to get to, the places I needed to get to were ready for me to get to them. And so when I left there, I was in dismay over decades of being treated with medications and side effects and being a shadow of myself some days just to get through it all. I'd save myself. You know what? I would save myself. I would come home in the evenings towards the end and just crash and sometimes not get out of bed on the weekends. But why is it? Why is it? One dose, one medicine, one treatment, decades untangled. And I didn't know about this as one of the leaders in American healthcare. I created one of the larger healthcare organizations in the world. I sold it to another large healthcare organization. I had hundreds of doctors that worked for me that were some of the best. And why didn't I know about this? That was when I started.
What's the answer to that question? Why didn't you know about it?
I think we all have a good hint, right? After you've been into it for a while, yeah, there's this stigma behind psychedelics. And certainly it was the stigma that influenced me a little bit. I had not done psychedelics since I was 18 years old. I was in college. I was in engineering before I went into medicine. And I think a, quote, friend of mine cut up a 10 block of acid and put it in my mustard.
That's a hell of a
corn
prank.
dog I was eating. And that was not a grand experience. That's a hell of a prank, right? And so there was a stigma behind it, but no, there's more than that. I think we all know it. Western medicine is got a different mentality about it. So there's a combination of the stigma. There's a combination of the fact that there's certain people that are, in my opinion, my humble opinion, there's certain industries that are paranoid about something like this that can be so
Yes,
healing
of
and
course, of
effective.
course. Education. What about the educational aspect of it? Like, before the stigma sets in, you have to hear about this. You have to know about it. And like you, perhaps before that education even sinks in or is accessible to us, we have, let's say, recreational access to some of these medicines that we don't use as such and kind of, misuse them, use them in inappropriate ways. And again, that's just because the education is lacking. But in terms of the education around some
Right.
of these substances within the context of the medical field, can you give us a sense of, what level of exposure, if any, there is to these throughout the educational and kind of training aspects of, let's say, a doctor that's coming into the healing space? Do you see
Zero.
that changing right now?
Zero.
Because the cat's out of the bag, right?
I see that there's cats out of the bag. There's several catalysts, but the cat's out of the bag, but the bag is still being appropriately blocked. The message is still being, in my opinion, appropriately subdued in a lot of areas. Why is it with all of the research that we have towards this, with good data, why is it took this long for Stanford to produce the stuff they did on Ibogaine that just now got released in April of last year in Nature magazine, and Stanford finally reproduced it again, with such astounding results that researchers are having to go back and relook at their data because this can't be right. Why has it not penetrated more? That question I keep coming around to. Now, I will tell you, Western trained physicians just have no idea about this. In fact, when I went on my journey, I was discredited and disowned to a certain extent by my own people. They were like, "What are you doing? You're just some crazy rich dude now that made his money and now he's just going to go off and do nutty things and be eccentric." No, I had to heal. And it's the test of time that really changed their minds. A lot of the people that, when I came back, I'll tell you my story real quick. I went down after I sold my company in June of 22. August of 23 is when I went because I told them I'd stay on for a year, help them transition everything. And when I came down in 23, I came back from that and I went to one board meeting and I sat there for about 45 minutes, looked around the room at all the miserable people sitting around me, some of them my own that I'd brought into the loop. And I stood up and I walked out. I never went back. I think I turned my phone off for a month. I don't know, something like that. I needed to figure out my next steps, which I'm thoroughly enjoying now. But in that time, I got to explore a lot of different reasons as to why this is the case in psychedelic medicine. So actually, after about a month or so of being out of that loop, started going and traveling the world, going to other places, interviewing shaman and taitas and trying to understand the culture behind the plant medicine. And, I'd already learned the science of it pretty well, what was available. But now I was exploring something deeper than that. And it was probably a couple of months after I came back from that journey that my friends from that side of things started finding me like, "Hey, are you alive? Are you okay? Where have you been?" And they were all amazed to see that guy that came back was still there. That I think my sister said it best. She goes, "Charlie, even your eyes are smiling now." And that's because I had found peace on top of happiness, right? So the test of time is really taken for a lot of them. It's been, a year and a half now, still
Amazing.
no medications. One of the most amazing things is that during the first Gulf War, I sustained a back injury and I had permanent nerve damage in my left leg, neuropathy, burning, horrible pain at times, usually at nighttime when you're not distracted. When the Ibogaine kicked in, I remember for the first time the pain went away. It was the most astounding thing. Now, Ibogaine breaks down into noribogaine. Noribogaine attaches to the opioid receptors, everything else, right? So I thought there might have been some of that. My neuropathy hasn't come back. So the neuroplasticity of these medicines is real, and I'm case in point for it. When you're looking at veterans that are suffering from TBI in combination with their PTSD, it really starts to make sense how a lot of this is working. But back to your original question of what's it going to take? I went to the Vets Conference in November of that year out in San Diego, and I heard Senator Crenshaw and ex-Governor Rick Perry speaking and advocating these treatments. And I'm like, they had it buried on page 147 of some bill, a little line for $15 million for Ibogaine research. And I'm like, what else is in that bill, right? What did they have to bury this in there to get this in there? And I think they got 10 million out of it in the end. But I thought to myself on the way home, I said, why do more people not know about this? I could tell my story a million times, and I figured it wouldn't be as effective as putting my money where my mouth is and telling the story perspective. So at that time, I looked over at my family and I said, I'm going to create a TV show. And they're like, what? I said, I'm going to create a TV show that touches the hearts of Americans, that takes all of this empathy we have around our veterans right now and what they're going through. And I'm going to tell the stories. I'm going to tell the story of them. And as they go through the process, document it. That was just an initial idea. Lo and behold, it became a reality as they laughed and said, you don't know anything about TV. I'm like, I've been watching it since I was 2. I know TV, but I do know as a leader, you get the right people on the team. And you get the right people in the team and you produce something wonderful. But now that's where the idea for my television show, Healing Heroes, No Mind Left Behind, came from. Essentially, it evolved very quickly. I was just going to shoot a pilot episode. Had a gentleman named Ryan. I had taken care of his family for decades as a physician before I moved into running the business. And he had suffered a traumatic brain injury and PTSD. And, you could just look at his Facebook posts and go, he's happy. He's doing everything. Look at me. I'm working for my dad again. You learn to see through that stuff. And sure enough, one night about 3:00 in the morning, I don't even know why. I didn't touch my phone forever, but I picked my phone up and I turned on in Facebook. There's Ryan, Facebook Live, full confession. Basically saying that it was either put the gun back in his mouth again or ask for help. And he didn't know who to ask for help. He did not want to tell his family about it because he didn't want his family to know how broken he was. But he didn't know who else to help. So literally pleading to anybody that would watch his Facebook Live, and I was viewer one of one. He ended his transmission, and it was about 3:30 in the morning. I called him about 6, and the post was already taken down. Finally got in touch with him and told him about what I'd done. He couldn't afford it. I said, dude, I've known your family for decades. I'll pay for it. And it was out of that we evolved the pilot. And Ryan would be part of the pilot. We document everything going through. When I proposed it to him, I said, Ryan, dude, what do you think about this? He was like, you want to document for people to watch what I've been through and going through? And I said, yeah, screw that. I'm not doing that. And I laughed. I said, no problem, man. I'm still covering your treatment. And it was probably about a day or two later, he calls me back. He says, hey, will this help people? I said, if you do it right, absolutely. But it's going to take work, brother. I said, the medicine's just a small part of this. I said, it takes work. And he agreed. And then I said, hey, how nice would it be to have a female in the pilot with him? So I reached out to one of my other friends she was an older female. Her trauma did not come from combat, came from rape. It came from her son committing suicide, who was also on active duty. And I thought it would tell a good dichotomy of the story in different demographics. She had to back out, unfortunately, because of some health in her family. But I went to Mission Within and I talked to Martine Polanco and I said, hey, man, I need some people. I need to figure out who I can put in this pilot. Gigi, who works with Martine, I said, how do I choose? There's so many people that can't afford this, that can't do it. I said, you know what, Gigi? Pick me the ones that you lost sleep over when you had to tell them no. And she came up with a list of people that when I called them, I couldn't say no to any of them. I got on the phone with them. I turned to my team. This was 6 weeks before we shot the pilot in Tulum. And I looked at my team and I just said, guys, I'm going to fund all of season 1. We're just going to do it. And we took all 6 of them down, brought the healers to Tulum. We engineered a program specifically for veterans that addresses a lot of the issues and trauma that they may have that the rest of the public doesn't. For example, the separation trauma from leaving a group of camaraderie, a group of culture, and coming into a world where their purpose is now gone. In a lot of cases, they don't have the same job role. They're usually making less money. And a lot of, so I shot all of season 1 in June of 24, and it was amazing. Let me tell you, as a physician, I was triple boarded. I mean, I just kept learning. And there's maybe 3 or 4 days a year in that job as a physician that you're just like, yes, that was an awesome save. Or I had an impact today, and you just are walking on air, right? All I got to say is to facilitators that work in this space, those that are of you out there that are good, that know what you're doing, I am so jealous of you. I am so jealous of you because those 10 days in Tulum, they were the best 10 days of my career. Watching 6 individuals, of which we had first responders as well, Fire Department of New York, Police Department of New Jersey, all the branches represented. It was amazing to watch that transformation. And we did a lot of work going into it. We did a lot of work coming out of it. And those 6 individuals are like my family now. In fact, 3 of them already work for me on some of the bigger projects. But, I listened to one of your podcasts, a couple of them actually. And when I saw I was going to be on your show today, you won my instant respect. Oh, I believe your last one, where you were talking specifically about the amount of work that has to go into this. I'll just tell you, and I can't go into the personal side of this too much. I don't want to. It's just not right. But what I will tell you, though, is that I've seen the worst that this field can deliver.
Which field, the medical field or the military?
Psychedelic medicine. I've seen some really bad outcomes. Now, the other ones, yes, of course, I've seen that too, right? Everything's got its ups and its downs. And I will tell everybody there's good providers, bad providers, and anything that you do. But I've personally dealt with the impact of somebody very close to me that went to people that didn't know what they were doing. And I lost them. And when I say lost them, not their life, but let's just put it this way. If you're not willing to give the people access to your mind, that you wouldn't also give them your bank account number and your PIN number.
It's a nice way to frame it.
And I'm not saying there's any people with ill will out there. These people probably meant good.
That's right.
Just didn't know what they were doing, and it taught me a valuable lesson.
I'm glad you bring this up. To bring a little caution to the space is most definitely necessary, especially with people that hear about the beautiful outcomes and these amazing transformations. We also have to make sure that we're kind of paying respect to both sides of the coin here. And so because we have this, I call it kind of like a re-emerging field, right? Because this is ancient stuff that we're playing with. We just aren't educated to it. And so we're like children playing with power tools. The power tools are fantastic. They could do great things, but without our education, without our respect, without our preparation, we can really kind of mess things up very quickly. And to your point, as they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? So there are a lot of people that have had profound experiences in this space, see the potential, and rush into the space to try and help. But without some level of community, without some level of education, amongst other things, it's very easy to mess things up, right? Because we're dealing with people's bodies, we're dealing with people's minds, the psychology of it all, the spiritual aspect of it all. It's sacred ground, and we should approach it as such. And so that's part of that education process that we touched on previously. And it's an important part of the education process, and should be a table setter, in my opinion. As much as what you touched on in your opening is 4 months of preparation. That's impressive. It's necessary, and a lot of people in this space say that your medicine journey starts when you start preparing for it, not when you actually take the medicine. We like to separate things and compartmentalize things to understand things, and unfortunately, sometimes we make certain distinctions that do more to hurt than to help. And the distinction between the preparation and the medicine and the post-integration are distinctions that I believe should not be made. I think it's one holistic package. And I think that a lot of these common Western illnesses that we're currently dealing with are byproducts of the mind and psychology. So once we start to even think about the preparation aspect for one of these medicine experiences, what are we doing? We're starting to adjust our diet, right? Very basic stuff, the 101 stuff, diet, sleep, exercise. We start to focus there. And just by working with these medicines, because these are medicines, right? Let food be thy medicine. There's a reason why That's in the Hippocratic Oath, right? There's a reason why we value rest and exercise. And so these are subtle medicines. Once we start working with these medicines, some of those conditions start to kind of unwind, and it primes us for these actual ceremonial experiences with plant medicines in a very, very profound way. Otherwise, what happens is without the preparation, some people jump into it, and throughout their session, they may be dealing with unwinding some of the conditions that could have been slowly diminished through their preparatory experience. And that's why we need kind of, we need a level of education that really spotlights the before and after, not just focuses on the actual medicine itself.
So one of the things that just shocked me the most was that because of the economy behind it all, I would presume, the 2 sessions before and 2 sessions after prep that a lot of people go through for this experience. Now, again, I went to a center where I was there for 10 days, so there was a lot done in that 10 days as well. It's just, it's not one size fits all, is it? And too many people are treating it that way. So I started looking about a year ago, really trying to figure out, with a background in engineering, background in medicine and business, I love problem solving. And I was like, how can we leverage technology to really help us identify the people that need more integrative work afterwards and need or start to fall off and their numbers start to climb again if you're going to measure this on some sort of a scale, whichever one you choose. And out of that whole process, I was really designing something more for veterans to, as they finish programs, to track them along, to watch their progress. And something beautiful came out of it. I can't talk about yet, but it's an application that actually is coming to light in the next 6 months that is more for the veteran space, but it was birthed from that. It's just amazing the catalyst and the side effect and the butterfly effect you get for some of this. But anyway, yes, I what I would tell you I'm very proud of that I know I can't offer to every veteran or every person in the space that needs help is that those 6 individuals, they were so courageous. Think about it. Some dude calls them up in the middle of the night and says, hey, Gigi from Mission Within gave me your name and said you were interested but couldn't afford treatment. I'm doing something very similar. Here's my setup. Here's my background. I didn't realize until the post film. So what I did is that in early June, I did a U.S. tour around to all 6 of these individuals. I interviewed their inner circle, their family, what was being said, what wasn't being said, what were they like before, what were they like now. And then converge on Tulum. I rented out a whole resort that we just brought them in and we documented everything going through. We did telescopic breath work. We did meditation training. We did Watsu. I mean, we pulled everything in, sound healing, everything in to teach them as their adjunctive tools that they could take with them, including, of course, diet, ice plunges, everything else that they could take with them afterwards as tools. And we did the stages of healing that were very important in mine. So when I was doing U.S. tour number 2, so after the 10 days, we sent them home, let them have reunions with their families, which just heard amazing stories. And then U.S. tour, I started about 30 days after the filming, which would have been around August, September last year. And started in Philadelphia. It was the most amazing thing to hear the families talk to me at that point and hear what they had gone through. But every place I went to was just another success story. The consistency, though, and the fact that it was the prolonged program, the fact we still have, and we're still in touch with each other. In fact, today, I mean, we're still in our same WhatsApp group, going back and forth, supporting each other when somebody's down. It really shows you how that loss of community really affects a lot of people. I was reading for the 3rd time, Tribe by Sebastian Junger, right? Where he talks about the fact that Western world has 8 to 9 times the amount of mental health issues as third world countries in a lot of cases, because there's loss of community in Western world, especially in America. There's loss of purpose. My gosh, that's the same perfect formula that our veterans go through, just a lot more rapid. Anyway, so I will tell you, there's we have a trailer that was released on Veterans Day for Healing Heroes, No Mind Left Behind, and I had to recapture a very special moment. I was up in Oregon visiting Keegan, another one of the participants who almost didn't make it on the show. He was almost an alternate, but I begged my team to please put him in, and I'm so glad. He's such a badass. And I went up to visit him. He has 2 young girls that I'm like their uncle now, love them to death. And one of them, Maisie, looks up at me and says,
Wow.
Thanks for giving my daddy back. And I'm like, I wish I would have had a camera on that. I mean, more so from the sense, not for me, but
Right. They
for
need to hear that.
everybody to
Right.
see the
That's a whole
power.
different documentary. You can just trail the families of these people and you're going to get a completely different product that'll be as impactful. I think people need to understand that because a lot of times we see and hear the after effect. The before and after juxtaposed, and combined is crucial.
Right. And we're continuing to film today. We currently have our release date, line in the sand of 5/31. And even though our pilot is complete, we've got big meetings this next week with some big companies, even possibly a theatrical release. Really interesting what turned out of this. It's an amazing piece. But, line in the sand is May 31st because I don't care if I have to put this on YouTube May 31st. It's going out. I don't care if I am minutes away from a deal with a big streamer. It's coming out May 31st. I drew that line in the sand. Anyway, so yes, it's an evolving story. And to see these people now grow and come on to some of my other projects, it's just amazing. Look, this TV show was not going to be my legacy or my future. It was my payback. It was I'm sorry I didn't know about this. Let me see if I can tell the world about it, because if the end users know about it and we're bypassing every other bottleneck and information coming into our society, let's go straight to the user and bypass that. Basically, by getting to their minds through their hearts, and these 6 individuals and every season we produce after that, opening their minds up and letting them make their own decisions. Whether they want to look at the mystical explanation, the spiritual explanation, the scientific explanation, which can't everybody, it's all the same.
It's hard to understand that until you've been through the process. It's just, it computes intellectually, but it doesn't really integrate. But I understand, and our audience will understand. So thank you.
Awesome. But, it's just to get through to them and start opening that mind up that, hey, why are you so closed down to what your pineal gland already produces?
You mentioned the fracture in community and purpose as being a leading contributor to some of these illnesses, let's say, that we're dealing with. And this plant medicine space seems to speak exactly to that. It was previously exclusively found within communal tribal settings, and it kind of demystified purpose. And now here we are kind of coming back full circle. And it's easy to see how this space addresses that in a really kind of, in a very succinct way. So scale is an issue, right? You mentioned you went to a 10-day retreat. You had the capability to do so. A lot of people that we're finding, especially people that need healing, don't have the capacity and capabilities to go on 10-day retreats. They're in a hard way. And what is, in your experience, what is the vehicle that allows us to touch these individuals right where they are, no matter what their background is or their means? How do we offer structured solutions without having to commit to traveling somewhere, doing a 10-day retreat, et cetera? Because those hurdles are tough to surmount for some people.
Very, very tough. First, another part of my dismay was that the people that have served this country were having to leave this country.
That hurts.
To go get better. That's sad. And now with psilocybin becoming more prominent and showing some great effects on a lot of the different areas of it, that's great. It's a double-edged sword. And here's what I mean. I'm a little bit nervous about the popularity of this show.
Absolutely.
About it opening up too much. Because I don't want people going to see Shaman Jane. And I'm sorry if your name is Jane and you're an awesome shaman. I'm sorry if I've mislabeled you, but I call Shaman Jane as kind of my nickname,
yes.
Kind of like a Karen, right? It's my nickname for the person that really shouldn't be treating in the space. Shaman Jane's got some stuff in her freezer, or so, she's been to a couple of treatments or to a couple of retreats, and now she or he thinks they're an expert.
There's no Yelp directory in this space, unfortunately.
That's where my negative. Right. And so it made me think, but do we need to create that? Is there something we can do that? Who would police that? Who would monitor it? I think, I don't know if you've ever met Jesse Gould with Heroic Hearts out of New York. Jesse runs a phenomenal organization where Heroic Hearts really, Army Ranger runs Heroic Hearts, a phenomenal organization that actually pays for
How's he funded?
Guys and gals to go into treatment, and first responders too.
Wow. Amazing.
A charity. And this guy, This guy spends 85% of his time raising money and not running a business, right? He's got people that work for pennies on the dollar because he has the culture and the drive of these people that know this is the right thing. And sorry, Jesse, I didn't know I was giving a push for you today, but there you go, buddy. You deserve it. But what I love about what Jesse's done is he's really built the book of here's the ethics, here's the standards, here's what a treatment center should go by. And he has applied that to the places he sends his people to. So he has no desire to own or to run treatment centers. But he goes, if you want our business, these are the SOPs, here's the basics of what you have to live by. And he's able to duplicate that over and over again. The saddest thing is somebody that's as much of a genius as he is so tied up into raising money to continue to send more people down. But we have a solution to that coming up real soon. With that said, the double-edged sword here is that we're going to create such an attention to this space that people are going to think, well, hell, my friend Jimmy, my tattoo artist, whatever, has some experience with this. I'm going to go into this. Caution,
Right.
everybody. There has to be a form of a check and balance system here because it can go the wrong way. What I would tell you, though, that's a nice little pleasurable thing. Barney Fritz, a good, very good, my best friend. He's awesome. He is a physician as well from the Navy. I asked him right before we shot in June last year, I said, Barney, can you come to set? I said, I'm the only MD and I'm going to be so busy directing, producing, and getting everything going for the shots and stuff. I could use some more initials on set. He goes, yeah, man, I'll be there. Barney came and, Barney and I know each other's story. And I know he was suffering too to a certain extent, but he hadn't gotten the calling yet, still hasn't. And, but he went through everything else. He went through our stages of healing. He went through everything else except for the medicine. And we had to come back and shoot here again after and just go, what happened to you? He was just like, I did the breath work. I did this. I did that. And oh my God, like it opened up so much for me. So I think there's a lot that goes along with the education of everything we do to prep going in, and on the other side of things that we can do to neuroregulate ourselves to help control a lot of this. Here's the sad thing about Western medicine. Until I came into it 26, 30 years ago, there really wasn't preventative healthcare for the physical body, right? And even now, mental health is looked at as not a real form of health. It's sad when it controls our physical health. And the fact that this thing is just a vehicle for our minds to get around for our experiences. But what are we doing to maintain the mind? What are we doing for preventative for the mind?
Most people don't realize it's broken.
Why aren't we teaching that? Right. But by the time they do, it's it's like, if you're going to use the analogy, you've got the nice shiny car, but your transmission's all locked up, or you haven't changed the oil in 100,000 miles. It's not running well, but they wait till the engine locks up. They wait till things break. And unfortunately, reactive medicine. And that's what I practiced for a number of years. You wait and take care of the heart attack after the heart attack, the stroke after the stroke. And we're doing it right now in mental health care, which I'm sorry for any of my friends out there that are in psychiatry that I love and respect so much, but it's in its diapers compared to other aspects of that. But sorry, I'll get on.
No, there are many to stand on. It's unfortunate, right? That's where we are, but it's also beautiful that we're seeing this massive change take place. You have, in mentioning Jesse Gould, you have a lot of these isolated efforts that are happening everywhere. We're dealing with a very fractured ecosystem, and there are many efforts that are being made right now to create some consolidation within this space, create a level of communication and a level of collaboration that will kind of have these seemingly separate nodes start to link up around greater efforts. And I think whether we realize it or not, we know that technology, like any other tool, could be used appropriately or misused, but we see certain elements of emerging technology that are starting to bridge certain gaps. And now, even with the onset of AI and its advancement specifically in the kind of plant medicine space, dealing with psychedelics, it's helping with that educational aspect, and it's also helping to connect certain dots. And I wanted to know if you said you can't talk about it much, but maybe if you can kind of hint at the capacity for technology to help us out in this current moment.
Well, I'll tell you, in the veteran space, first real hurdle for PTSD is even self-admission that there's something wrong. I knew there was something going on, but I thought I was hiding it pretty well. My isolation, my extrovertedness becoming more introvertedness. So the first step is just believing there's something wrong and admitting there's something
Now,
wrong.
how do you
And
do
then
that? I
having
don't mean to cut
enough
you off.
courage to
How do you
step
do
away.
that? Like, as an example, we don't,
No, it's fine.
we can't see our own blind spots. And so when we're talking about PTSD, we're already talking about
Mhm.
that kind of reactionary approach to a condition that's been wound up. And yes, that's real and it needs to be addressed. And it's already kind of under a level of pressure where if it's not addressed, we have other, let's say, symptomatic reactions that might be very detrimental to our health. The flip side of that coin is that, like we said before, sometimes you don't realize there's a problem until that engine light turns on because we're not addressing the body mind complex in a preemptive fashion. These medicines are amazing, not only from the reactive standpoint, but the proactive one, right? If we can't see our own blind spots, what are we missing? We're
Right.
missing a level of perspective, right? And so you understand what it is to run a business. You run a business for 20 years, you develop tunnel vision. And so sometimes we can only see within the framework and context of our conditioning and our programming. And what do we do occasionally as business people? We'll hire a consultant, an outside set of eyes to come in, evaluate the situation, give us a report, and then we get to kind of use, discard. We get to do what we want to do with that data, but ultimately we need that data every now and then to make sure that, right, we have perspective.
Absolutely.
And so these medicines also, go ahead, go for it, jump in.
So they do provide that, absolutely, but you've got to get that first step of being there. Because if you think about a typical veteran with PTSD, and I'm sorry, but I believe the number is much higher
I
than
agree.
11 to 18%, as some studies show. We're just not talking about it. In fact, you look at anything, it's another thing I heard in your cast. I'm like, yes, I love this guy. We're too busy
Right
labeling
on.
symptoms as a diagnosis and treating it in medicine, right? And so anything is related to a traumatic or a stressful event that throws us off the bin. But you have to have a veteran that sits there and, first of all, admits to themselves there's a problem. He gets enough courage to admit to somebody else, like a provider, that there's a problem, and is able to get over that by overcoming the stigma of, oh, wow, somebody's going to know I'm broken, or nothing works anyway, so why am I even going? It hasn't worked for any of my buddies, not the bullshit they go through. And then, oh my gosh, that provider fails, then have enough courage to get around that provider and somehow find psychedelic medicine and have enough trust to go for it there.
Right.
That's a lot of hurdles to get to psychedelic medicine. So what is a shortcut? For me, it's this show. And the reason we did this show and we chose the participants we did, I shouldn't say we did, the universe chose these people because they couldn't
Amen
come
to
together
that.
in any more of a magical cohort than what came together. And we're just so perfect. But you see these that came together, and it's about telling their story, because you tell enough stories and people are going to sit there and go, wow, I thought PTSD was a diagnosis of special forces or combat or the military. And no, it is life. A lot of people misunderstand traumas. Trauma doesn't have to be anything physical or anything strongly emotional. It could just be an important life lesson you missed along the way. And going back and re-looking at it a different way and pulling the positive out of it, right? But my hope is that maybe there is a woman sitting at home, never was in the military, and she's watching Courtney's story on the show, going, yeah, I was raped. Wow. It had nothing to do with her being active duty. It's that she was raped. And it's what she had to go through the trial afterwards and everything else, and the retrial. And oh my gosh, I was Keegan. I was abused sexually as a child. It's for enough people to be able to watch this and go, that's me. Or that's a combination of me. And for the first time, stand up and go, it's okay not to be okay. Look at these guys. I started telling the story a little bit earlier, and I want to finish it because it's super important right now. These 6 individuals, with the exception of Ryan, who knew me for a number of years, didn't know me from Adam. And here I am calling them up one night, and in a matter of 6 weeks, I have them in Tulum on medicine. I'd already been around, met their families. Keegan and Megan, in their post interviews, both said, Megan said, I gave it a 30 to 40% chance that I
Oh
was going to
boy.
be sold into sex slavery when I got down there. And we kind of laughed and joked, right? She goes, I've never been to Mexico. I didn't know anything about you. I just knew I was suffering. Keegan said, yeah, pretty funny because I thought there was a good chance I was going to wake up with one kidney. And I'm like, the courage that those 6 people had. I know me. I knew I was going to deliver the best product possible and give every bit of safety and at, spare no cost for them. They didn't know that. They were hurting that bad. And that's just 6 I picked randomly. Sorry, the universe picked randomly for me. But, the risk here is that so many people do start identifying. My answer to them would be find the right source for plant medicine or for whatever it is you can use for treatment. Make sure it's verifiable. And when the show launches, we'll have steps, we'll have resources, whatever. And I would love your help in designing that, to be honest with you, how to direct them towards the right people. But also just going through the steps. Look at all the other stuff we're teaching them on the show. Look at all the other things we're doing. We're explaining the different sides of how it works. Incorporate some of that in your life and let the healing start. Because you're right. The journey starts when you make the decision and you start the work. And that is the start of the work.
Yeah, you touched on, I have a little notepad right next to me and I have the word scale with a question mark, right? Like how does this thing scale out in a meaningful way without causing more damage, without causing more harm? And I think that's a question that's being answered through the community that's being built right now. So by sharing these conversations, these experiences, these podcasts, these documentaries, by getting this information out there, we are laying the groundwork for a community. And I think enough minds get together on this very central and critical topic of mental and physical health care for not only our soldiers, these are our kids, right? And so once we care enough to provide an infrastructure for this next generation that they could soundly ride on to addressing hopefully some of these issues before they become issues, then in that kind of vehicle, we create scale, we create community, we allow individuals to see that it is all purposely driven and that there aren't any coincidences here. And so every time we have one of these conversations, every time we have one of these experiences, as you've already identified, as we continue to do, we're bonding and we're creating the community that we need. And so obviously, I'm at your service, whatever you need. I believe in what you're doing. I believe in the effort at large. Um, I kind of raise my hand and I volunteer myself and I say, anything I can do to help, I'm here to help. We know how this works. We know that people, coming through these spaces, we basically turn into a family. There's no walking away from it. We don't see ourselves in any other way other than brothers and sisters in kind of united under one cause. And so I think that's beautiful, and I think that's what's sticky enough to kind of get all of these separate efforts unified. And I see it happening, and so it's just a matter of having these conversations and publishing them, and continuing to kind of just be in service of, right. And I think that's a healing modality that a lot of us neglect. I think that you are experiencing it, I'm experiencing it. It's once we get past our own stuff and we recognize the healing potential that's available to all of us when we give ourselves up wholly to one another. I think that's the most profound medicine in the world. And I think that we are just a little bit disconnected from it because of our own stuff. And so once we get our own stuff out of the way, we realize that we're not here for ourselves. It's not a selfish action or purpose, let's say. It becomes a selfless one. And in that way, when we think we're helping somebody else, we're actually helping ourselves. And I think that's exactly what's happening for all of us. I mean, you understand and you've experienced it yourself when you've seen the profound transformation that takes place in these individuals' lives. It has an effect on our hearts that is probably paramount to any medicine that I've ever done in my life. And it's been a number of years and a number of medicines. And I know that that one has affected me on the most deepest possible level. And it gives me, I shouldn't say it gives me, I think it reveals purpose, because I think it's baked into the equation and we just get disconnected from it because we get caught up in our head a little bit too much. That's a medicine that I would love to share with everybody because it doesn't require any hurdles. It doesn't require any significant means. It requires us to open up and heal ourselves. And in that way, we become conduits to healing for everything and everyone around us. And I thank you for doing what you're doing. And the best way I can thank you is to say, how can I help?
Thank you for that. First of all, I would just tell everybody exercise the same caution that I do. Nothing I've done in life has been for money. No, true. I've come across it and I've done very well. But when you put the project first, the rest of it just tends to make sense for most people. But I've run across quite a few people in this space that don't have that mindset, and don't let them infiltrate your space too far. They can certainly jack it up really quick. My other project is that I'm opening up the world's first ever resort for special needs families down here in Mexico. I relocated down here about a year ago. Love it. And it's amazing the number of people that come in to consult with me on that project. They're like, well, you can increase your margins here and there. I'm like, stop. So be cautious to those situations, because that's how a lot of our society is now forged, is based on the dollar first or money first. Don't let that get in your head, and try not to do business with anybody else that does. So how can you help? What I'd really likely help would be that our best chance of getting this message out and these very heartfelt stories is we're going to have our second trailer launch pretty soon. And I'd love to share it with you when it does. But more importantly, when this show hits, I'm actually going to have a viewing party for the pilot episode soon. I'd love for you to see it with us. And that way get a feel for what it is we're doing. But we've got to get behind messages like this. We've got to get behind the stories of the healing. And I think this is a great vehicle
Absolutely.
to do with our veterans and our first responders, the heroes of this country, right? So yeah, I'd love to get you in on that project. But where else I could really use your help is for everybody and all your listeners to help us construct the guide that in the show we can put and say, hey, here's what you look for in making sure you've got a good facilitator, good provider, somebody that's going to have good integration, good pre-work, post-work, and really get it. If you can help me construct that, I would be forever grateful. Thank you.
I'd be happy to share what's already kind of being built. And then as everyone else is kind of helping this effort along, we can collaborate to make sure that's done, because I'm hearing I'm having the same conversation with other individuals that are in this space in different areas from, different angles. And so we're all kind of saying the same thing. It's just a question of connecting the dots. And so that's beautiful because, it's not a ground up effort at this point. We already have some existing data that we can kind of work from. And I think we have a lot of great organizations like MAPS and Arrowwood and Fireside that are doing beautiful things in the space. So my immediate effort is kind of, consolidation, right? Because the consolidation of all these individual efforts gives us that level of education that perhaps right now isn't accessible to everybody. But as this this thing, I don't even know what to label it, starts to get popular and we start to read about it, not only in the scientific publications, but everything from Better Home and Gardens to Vogue to recently my wife showed me Oprah was doing an interview with Michael Pollan. They were talking about, psychedelics and the profound healing that can come with some of these tools. It's everywhere right now and it's spreading quickly. And so that's why we have to kind of move just as fast to make sure that we do connect these dots and create just a consolidated database basically of information for individuals that we have
to defragment the space, but we got to make sure when we defragment it,
right. That's why we need people like you. We need, so to speak, elders at the table that could kind of guide us in the right direction. I think it's critical, and I do think it's happening, and I think we just need to continue to share these dialogues, and then as you touched on before, the universe delivers, man. It's doing the whole thing. We're conduits to that, and so a big way to become a conduit to that is to get out of the way, and that's why the name of the podcast is once we can address our own stuff and get out of our own way, we realize there's something beautiful that's kind of operating behind the scenes that is very purpose driven and of a higher magnitude of intelligence that seems to be doing what it needs to do based on where we are as a society, as a culture, as a world. And it's amazing to watch that happen from the outside and from the inside. And so, the more that I think we share, the better it gets, man. And so that's the focus for the moment. No,
Love it,
thank
man.
you.
Thanks for
And
what you do.
it was a pleasure to meet you. It was a pleasure to hear from you. It's amazing to know that individuals like you are out there in the trenches doing this work. It's really, I can't put words to it, but it's very empowering and it's motivating, and it makes me say I'm not doing enough. And, if each one of us could kind of walk away with that call to action, I think we live in a better world here and now, and not someday, tomorrow, or a month from now. And so it's happening. Dr. Charlie Powell, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure we will stay in touch. And if you need anything, reach out separately. I look forward to the viewing party. I look forward to promoting your content on our channels and the channels of our friends. I will share your name.
Awesome, man. Thank you, guys.
Thank
And
you.
thank you to your listeners. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Subscribe, rate, and share so that we could do our part in spreading the light and diminishing the darkness.